I'm not important. I'm just me. There is nothing special about me. There is no reason I should have seen this, but I did. Every moment of my life could be dissected, and no thread would trace to what happened today. It was random, and that is the worst part of it all. It could have been anyone else, but it wasn't. I was at the mall in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I had the day off from work and decided to spend some money. I ate lunch, drank a bunch of soda. I walked around more. Then I had to use the restroom. I was closest to the one by FYE, which requires walking a couple dozen feet down a hallway. There weren't many people at the mall today. I was not surprised to be the only one relieving myself, especially in the less popular restroom so far from the food court. When I exited the bathroom, another was walking down the hall. Another. It walked like a person. It was wearing a hoodie and jeans. It was looking downward. I thought it was a man. Within seconds, I was close to passing by it. Then it looked up. My mind did not fully register what I was seeing on its face. Its eyes were a deep black and separated by a wide gap, with small nostrils located almost where a normal man's mouth should be. There was no visible chin, just blank white skin. Near the top of its neck was a long, narrow mouth, a single row of teeth on the top and bottom lips. It was behind me now, and I was still walking forward, stunned by what I first assumed was a massive physical deformity. I chose to glance over my shoulder, out of instinct and shock. It had stopped walking. It had turned around and was staring at me. Its arms drooped to its sides, and it opened its mouth slightly. A stench filled the hallway, flipping my stomach over. I stopped myself from vomiting and tumbled out into the open sitting area. A man was sipping from the water fountain on my left. He noticed my stumble and asked if I was all right. I motioned breathlessly to the hall. The man was clearly puzzled, and he leaned over to look down the hall. He stared only for a few seconds, unmoved. Then he turned back to me. He looked sad in a way and nodded slowly. I figured that for some reason I had hallucinated, and that this man thought I was insane. I looked back down toward the restroom. I shouted fearfully, seeing that it was still standing there, but closer. I looked back at the man next to me, who kept nodding as he slowly walked back out into the main section of the mall. What is it? What is it? I cried, not caring if I caused a scene. The awful smell was growing worse, and I heard footsteps coming from the hall. I ran out into the parking lot. My car was parked on the complete opposite side of the mall. I power walked all the way around the building, carefully looking over my shoulder the whole way. I sat in the nearby Barnes & Noble for hours. I stayed in the cafe, among plenty of other people. My mind was racing for an answer. I still haven't found one. I don't understand what I saw, or what the man was nodding at. I do not understand anything. I am afraid. If I ever smell that scent again, the bloody, filthy, decaying scent, I will not survive it, in one way or another. In July 2016, I went on a vacation to South Africa. I was told a story that I didn't at first believe until I saw the photographs. As a kid, I have always been scared of sharks, even when swimming in pools where I knew a shark couldn't ever get you. At night, I always saw dark shadows and was scared a shark or other creature was somehow swimming with me. In my mind, I felt somehow a mad killer had taken a shark via a tank on a truck and put it into the pool I was swimming in. While I've read of people buying baby sharks and putting them in pools, nothing has happened that was ever as scary as what happened at Bokamoso Pillay. She was married to Kangawo Pillay, a millionaire property developer. She loved to swim, so much so that her husband built her an amazing Olympic-sized swimming pool in their home. Now, their home was stunning, a gargantuan mansion that overlooked the sea. Since South African waters are so shark-filled, he wanted her to swim safely. While visually stunning, on stormy nights, the waves would often crash over into the pool area. There was a barrier protecting the ocean from the pool, so no one ever considered that a shark could somehow get across. But somehow, when the waters were extremely rough during the day, a huge 10-foot shark was carried by wave into the Pillay's pool. Other shark experts speculate that the shark was actually able to jump across, although the wave-carrying theory seems most likely. That night, the sea had calmed and everything seemed peaceful. The Pillays were celebrating their 5th wedding anniversary, and both waded into the shallow end of the pool. Playfully, Bokamoso swam into the middle of the pool, unaware that they weren't alone. Lurking in the waters was a great white shark, nearly twice the length of her. Both Bokamoso and Kangawo were splashing around when, for a split second, Bokamoso disappeared under the water. As her head rose with a smile, suddenly the great white shark came from behind. It opened its mouth wide and pounced on her head. She had little chance as its teeth sank into her neck, ripping her head from her body. Kangawo swam to the shallow end steps and raced to a nearby cleaning net. While he tried to hit the shark with the pole, he could see amongst the blood that her lifeless body was already torn to shreds. He froze, taking in the horror swimming around in front of him. When the police came, they didn't know what to do. In fact, there was nothing they could do. But ultimately, on Kangawo's wishes, they left, leaving his home with the shark still swimming in his pool. There are a few conflicting accounts on what happened next. Some say he just let the shark swim around the pool until it starved to death. Others say that he had the pool drained and that the shark eventually suffocated. Either way, he made sure the shark died in a horrific fashion. No one fully knows how he killed the shark because a few weeks later, his body was found in the sea by the pool. Depressed and suicidal, he had tied weights to his ankles. He blamed himself for his wife's death and couldn't get over the guilt of building the swimming pool beside the ocean. In September 2017, the property was purchased by a famous hotel chain and has now been converted into a 5-star hotel. The swimming pool still exists by the ocean. No additional fencing or prevention has been initiated since the safety experts claim it was a freak occurrence. Next time you're going to swim in a pool, before diving in, just give it a quick look over. While finding a shark in there is near impossible, You don't want to be the one person, like Bokamoso, to get unlucky. This is a few weeks old, and after being stalked for some time, I was not sure if I should post this, as it is altogether a different theme. Still, I hope it serves as a warning to all of you. Maybe it can save you. I am writing this from a hospital bed in South Africa. You may start to see this report come through on the news, or you may not. Apologies in advance. Typing with one arm is proving more difficult than I previously thought. I always thought I was lucky. I have always loved sharks. Living in the UK, brought up on a culture of sensationalized newspaper headings and Google searches, dozens of shark movies, Jaws, Deep Blue Sea, I prefer the more credible ones, made me well versed in shark attacks, a weird and often complete conversation stopper. So much so that throughout my early teens, I didn't really talk much about them, just read the headlines and wanted to be a scuba diver, researching and learning about these magnificent species us humans have an innate fear of. When I was 16, I learned about a small tribe that used to build shark pools and give a contender, a teenager, a stick with a shark tooth on it as a weapon, as a test of manhood. I read a fair bit, but facts and fiction are often blurred. I remember telling my parents and sister about these at the dinner table. You can probably tell that I was not the most popular kid in school. That said, for my 17th birthday, my parents somehow found one of these teeth that had been used in these fights. It was slightly discolored and only about half a finger long. To me, it had meaning, and I wore it everywhere I went. It became symbolic, I guess, as a present from my parents. I never took it off. Since then, I had always been lucky. Any time I was near the sea, there was always a shark sighting a few days after. On a trip to Cornwall when I was 19, after I had finished a quick session of surfing before the inevitable clouds rolled in and it started raining, I had just gotten into my car with Josh, my best friend, and he spotted the telltale fin slicing through the water close to where we had been. I was in awe, and I remember rushing out of my car onto the beach. The fin stayed for a few minutes and disappeared. At that point in my life, I had decided to fulfill my dream. I was going to scuba dive with sharks. Not just any sharks, but great whites. These occurrences happened most of the time I wouldn't notice. There were no attacks. Exams came and went, and I found myself graduating with a decent degree. I knew it was time. Josh and I planned an excursion. I guess I dragged him along. He was also into them, but not as much as I. We headed up to Cape Town 2 weeks ago. Spent a few days doing touristy things, acclimatizing, eating lots, and soaking up the sun before the big day. Waking up at 6 a.m. to get a boat to Dyer Island, a popular shark spot, due to the seals that live on the island, was a sure way to get the sighting we wanted. Armed with our GoPros and scuba gear, we did our pre-checks as always. Air, BCD, weights, fins, you get it. The dive cage looked sturdy enough, and the operator was a seasoned veteran. We felt comfortable and confident. At 10:30ish, we saw the first great white. It circled the boat, bumped against it to the screams and cheers of the rest of the tourists with us. Due to our booking spot, we were in the cage last, and had to watch as mums, dads, and their children all around the same age gingerly got into the shark cage and spent 15 minutes looking, taking pictures, and coming out with the awe and wonderment on their faces that I had so wanted for many years. At 13:15, it was our turn. We both did our buddy checks and hopped over the end of the boat. Josh got in first, moved to the side so I could get in. The shark cage was small. I am 6'2", and there was barely enough room to submerge us completely. The bars were so close together and strong, you could, if you wanted to, put a hand out and touch the shark as it passed by, but only one gentleman did, who had come every year for the past 10 years, something I was extremely jealous of. Regulators dropped down so that people without their own gear could still dip below the surface of the choppy water and see these creatures properly. The water crystal clear with a visibility of easily 30 meters. I dropped in, gave the OK signal to Josh, and we went under. Looking up, we were only a few inches from the surface, and there was decent headroom before the hatch we would go in and out of. I made a mental note of how on earth I would get back out of it, considering I'm a big guy. And then I saw one gliding towards the cage, mouth slightly open, full of teeth. It materialized into view, a true predator that no camera or phone can truly do justice to. I fiddled for my GoPro record button, looked at Josh, and he nodded that it was on. This particular great white was no baby. It must have been around 21 feet. I figured it was a female, as males rarely get that large. As it came closer to the cage, my heart pounded in my chest, not from fear, but because I had finally accomplished my dream. Here I was, miles away from home, with my best friend, and doing what I loved. Finally. At this point, I moved a little closer to the side of the cage. The fish had turned parallel to us. I shivered slightly as water moved through my wetsuit, and I realized my necklace had ripped my wetsuit and was dangling out of the hole it had poked itself through. Annoyed, I looked back up, first at Josh, gave the OK signal, and went back to watching, hoping I had a few minutes longer before I was torn away from this place. As I looked around, there were a few smaller sharks nearby, but our big female had gone, disappearing into the depths. Happy, and after a few more precious minutes, we resurfaced, signaling to the operators we were indeed happy. Then disaster struck. The shearing of metal was the only thing I heard before I was dropping back into the water, almost on top of Josh. I flipped over and realized the little bit of air between the surface and the cage had gone. I shoved my regulator back in and wildly looked around. The monster female glided past. My heart raced as I frantically looked around to see Josh staring above us. I looked, disbelief and panic coursing through every part of my being as I realized the cage was sinking. The cage was bent and buckled, and the hatch was wide open. I shot towards the hatch and closed it just as the shark came in for another hit. Its eyes rolled back as it slammed against the cage. We shot back against the wall of the cage, our tanks preventing us from moving too much as the shark's jaws opened and slammed into the cage. The cage went in a tumble. Dazed and confused and petrified of what to do, we huddled together as the shark circled us, watching us from those black eyes, mouth slightly open. The cage hit the sea floor. We must have been 20 meters below the surface. The floor was sandy. We looked at each other, fear across both of us, and as the shark circled us tighter and tighter, watching and waiting. I looked around, hoping, praying that something was going to save us. Josh too watched the shark as its fins brushed the side of the cage. It was waiting for something. I grabbed Josh's air gauge and realized in a panic that our breathing rhythm was gone. We had barely any air left. That was when the shark came in once more. It crashed against the metal. The metal groaned and bent and buckled under the strain. It grabbed Josh and threw him against the other side, my shoulder exposed to the razor-sharp teeth. I didn't feel it at first. In the static panic and delirium, I briefly thought my dog had grabbed my arm and was vigorously shaking it. The shark let go, and red filled the cage. The pain didn't register instantly, but when it did, it was blinding. I looked down to see the tattered remains of my upper arm, bit to the bone, the flesh clinging and floating in the water, resembling that of algae on a piece of driftwood. I used my good arm to pull myself away from the shark, who once again circled us, knowing that we had limited time. As the shark drifted off once more, and with Josh trying to keep watch of it, and me not trying to give in to shock, I slipped my weight belt off me and used it as a makeshift tourniquet. Josh realized quickly and helped. It stemmed the blood flow, but hurt a lot more. At this point, I thought my life was over. The shark seemed to have disappeared, given that our visibility was severely reduced due to the amount of blood in the water. We knew it was our only chance. Josh looked at me and made me go towards the hatch, which was, by some miracle, still working. He unclipped the hook and threw it open, peeking out to ensure it was safe for me before we committed. We tore our weights off and deflated our BCDs in order to compensate for the lack of weights holding us down. Josh slid through the hatch and reached out to pull me through, wincing in pain as my arm snagged on one of the buckled bars and my legs scraping against the metal cutting deep. We were out of the cage. As we floated there desperately looking around, starting to feel the telltale signs of the sliver of air left in our tanks, the shark had come back. It darted through the water, its powerful tail fins pushing it through. It came right at us, mouth open, eyes rolled back. I pushed Josh out of the way, and its jaws enveloped me. Like a hot knife through butter, it cut deep into me and shook me, dragging me back down to the ocean floor, away from salvation and hope. In my desperation, I clung onto its snout, its beady eye looking straight into mine. My already mutilated arm hung useless out of its mouth as it increased the pressure on my chest. I felt bones snap, lungs puncture and flesh melt. I screamed. My regulator flew out of my mouth as blind panic set in. I groped toward its eye, hoping to put it off. I couldn't see Josh. I couldn't see virtually anything through the red clouds of blood spiraling up to the surface. I got lucky. My dive tank had remained intact despite the force of the shark's bite on me. As the shark increased pressure, the dive tank blew. The shark let me go and swam off, holding my last bit of breath, my BCD in tatters, blood pouring from so many places. I looked around, desperate to find Josh and get to the surface. Then I saw him below me. His regulator was out of his mouth, and his mask was drifting down. He had a confused expression, accompanied by a silent scream. His legs to the knee were missing, tattered flesh remained, thighs twitching. He was missing an arm, and the one that remained was pointing at me. It is as if he had realized he could not reach the surface, and his last dying thought was related to why he couldn't move his legs. Everything started to go black. Through my decreasing vision and the feeling of weightlessness, I saw the shark again circling me. At that point, something in me snapped. I wouldn't roll over and die. I kicked my legs, realizing that all parts of me still worked. The shark followed, biding its time. I hit the halfway mark before it made its move. It swam straight towards me, cutting through the water. It bit into my leg, cutting deep into the shin bone and thigh. It instantly let go and began circling again. I swam with my one good arm and one good leg. I broke the surface and screamed. Behind me, the fin reached the surface and started approaching. I looked around and saw the boat, tourists crying and screaming for me to swim, the operators shouting at each other, and the tattered remains of their winch system for the cage. I tried to swim, but I couldn't. I was defeated, low on blood and filled with far too much pain. As I heard a roar near me, I figured it was the shark. After tormenting me for so long, it had come for one last time. I accepted it and closed my eyes. I blacked out before it hit me. The next thing I knew was the feeling of the sun on my face. People hurriedly speaking, screams of pain and anguish. I opened my eyes to see the operator and the tourist, the one I had been jealous of working on me, stuffing me full of towels and applying pressure all over my body and telling people to stand back and not open my wetsuit. I blacked out again. And here I woke up. After several operations, a week of intensive care, countless blood transfusions and stitches, missing several chunks of bone and skin and muscle, I sit here. When I first woke up, I saw Josh's parents first. I asked where he was. They cried, and then I realized he was never going to come home with me. I slept after they left, weak and exhausted. My dreams were filled with the shark, the way I had last seen my best friend pointing at me, confusion etched onto his face, as that picture is etched into my brain. My parents and girlfriend flew in the next few days. There was lots of crying, and after a few months of rehabilitation and skin grafts, I should be able to have full use of my limbs again. I was lucky, apparently. The diver operator came in with his crew and expressed their concern and were glad I was recovering. They apologized profusely and that it was a freak accident. I'm sure they were worried about an impending lawsuit. Josh's parents are due to come soon. They want to know what happened to their son. They know he passed, but I guess they want absolute clarity. I reached up to my necklace, hoping it would provide an ounce of comfort as it had so many times before, only to find it gone. I sighed, but deep down, I think I understood. Sharks never forget.